Dealers can't sell them, boaters won't touch them. 18 outboard engines, once marketed as maintenance-free revolutions, now fill warehouses and classifieds as unwanted anchors on the industry. Behind the empty promises and failed innovations lies a perfect storm. Rushed engineering, regulatory deadlines, and corporate pressure that left reliability in ruins. How did so many engines go from next-gen hope to unwanted stockpiles? And what really happens when an entire industry gambles on untested technology? Across glossy brochures and looping trade show videos, the outboard engine industry spent years perfecting the art of the promise. Maintenance-free for 3 years. Run it, forget it. Revolutionary direct injection, cleaner, faster, smarter. The early 2000s marked a new era of marketing bravado, where horsepower numbers climbed and claims of efficiency and simplicity grew even bolder. Slogans like "Next Generation Power" and "Built for the Long Haul" weren't just taglines. They set expectations for a boating public eager to believe that technology could finally banish the headaches of constant upkeep. The language was everywhere. Ads boasted of 20% more power with 30% less fuel, and brands competed to one-up each other with assurances of no scheduled maintenance for 300 hours or the cleanest outboard ever built. Magazine spreads featured families gliding across glassy water, the engine barely audible, the implication clear. Worry and breakdowns were relics of the past. Even the fine print played along, promising advanced corrosion resistance and digital reliability. Dealerships echoed these claims on showroom floors. Sales staff, armed with factory talking points, described new models as bulletproof and virtually self-maintaining. For many buyers, the pitch was irresistible. After years of wrestling with carburetor adjustments and oil mixing rituals, the dream of a plug-and-play outboard felt like a breakthrough. The cultural mood was buoyant, shaped by the belief that marine engineering had finally caught up with the needs of real-world boaters. Industry historians point to this period as a textbook case of manufactured hope. The advertising didn't just sell engines, it sold freedom from the past. But beneath the surface, the reality of what these new technologies could actually deliver was far more complicated. The gap between promise and performance would soon become impossible to ignore. By the turn of the millennium, outboard engineers faced a tightening vice of deadlines and demands. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, along with international regulators, set firm dates for cleaner marine emissions. Phase 2 and Phase 3 rules required dramatic cuts in particulates and nitrogen oxides between 2006 and 2010. Manufacturers had to deliver engines that ran cleaner, burned less fuel, and still satisfied boaters hungry for more horsepower. At the same time, the price of aluminum and fuel climbed, squeezing budgets and forcing every company to promise more with less. Instead of a gradual transition, the industry found itself racing the clock. Emissions compliance, consumer expectations, and cost constraints collided in the engineering department. The result was a three-way mandate crunch. Meet the new EPA rules, don't lose ground on performance, and hit aggressive cost targets. Years of sequential research and development were compressed into months. Prototypes that might have seen years of field testing went straight to production lines. Direct fuel injection, digital controls, and lightweight alloys all were pushed into service before real-world reliability could be proven. The pressure reached beyond the lab. By 2000, the outboard market had contracted from over 100 manufacturers in the 1960s to just a handful of global players. Consolidation meant fewer choices for dealers and buyers, but it also concentrated risk. If a new engine failed, there was nowhere for dealers to turn. Floor plan financing locked dealers into holding inventory, even as warranty claims and service bulletins piled up. Some models saw multiple recalls before their first full season on the water. For engineers, the mandate was clear but unforgiving. Deliver a breakthrough engine, on time, under budget, and in compliance, or risk the company's future. The race for innovation, once a point of pride, became a scramble to avoid disaster. Under these conditions, shortcuts weren't an accident. They were a survival tactic. The stage was set for a wave of engines that looked perfect on paper but carried hidden flaws beneath the cowling. Direct fuel injection arrived in outboard engineering with the promise of cleaner running, more power, and almost surgical efficiency. But in the rush to meet new emissions rules, these systems became the industry's most expensive experiment. The evinrude ficht ram injection is a case study in how things can go wrong at scale. Mechanics recall engines arriving on trailers with melted pistons and scorched cylinder walls, sometimes after just a few months on the water. At the heart of the problem sat the injector bolts, holding back 1,500 PS1 of fuel pressure. Those bolts, often undersized and prone to shearing, would fail without warning. When they did, the result wasn't just a minor leak. Fuel sprayed into the power head, igniting catastrophic detonation and turning a high-tech outboard into a total loss. For some owners, the first sign of trouble was a loud bang followed by silence and an oil slick trailing behind the boat. The fallout hit more than just a single brand. Johnson, sharing the same ficht system, inherited the same flaw. Service bulletins multiplied, but the fixes lagged behind the failures. Mechanics in coastal towns began refusing ficht jobs outright, calling them hopeless cases. Warranty claims soared. Outboard Marine Corporation, the parent company, filed for bankruptcy just days before Christmas in 2000, leaving thousands of engines stranded without support. Mercury's Optimax, another direct injection flagship, offered its own promise: two-stroke punch with four-stroke efficiency. But the complexity of its ignition and fuel systems turned routine maintenance into a diagnostic puzzle. Mechanics needed specialized computers and software to even begin troubleshooting. One technician described Optimax service as a science experiment every time. Owners faced a maze of error codes, limp home modes, and sensor failures. For dealers, stocking Optimax meant bracing for a season of callbacks and angry customers. Even Yamaha, long regarded as the safe bet, stumbled with its HPDI series. The nickname, highly prone to daily issues, spread quickly among boaters and service techs. Chronic injector fouling, oil starvation, and digital throttle glitches turned what should have been a reliable workhorse into a source of daily frustration. Yamaha's reputation for bulletproof reliability took a hit, and some dealers quietly shifted their inventory away from HPDI models altogether. Across the industry, these over-engineered engines created a new kind of risk. Dealers watched as service bays filled with engines that couldn't be fixed quickly or at all. Owners who bought into promises of maintenance-free boating found themselves stranded, facing repair bills that often exceeded the value of their outboard. The technology had outpaced the industry's ability to support it, and the cost was measured in more than just dollars. Force outboards arrived on showroom floors as the answer for budget-conscious boaters, but the savings came at a price hidden inside the cowling. Born from Chrysler Marine and later absorbed by Mercury, Force engines were a patchwork of old designs and cost-cut shortcuts. Mercury's badge engineering strategy paired familiar power heads with cheaper alloys, minimal corrosion protection, and bargain bin electronics. Mechanics opening up late 1990s Force models recall ignition modules that failed after a single season, gear cases that wore out twice as fast as their Mercury-branded twins, and coolant passages so rough that overheating became a routine call-out. Warranty claim rates for Force engines ran 2 to 3 times higher than for mainstream models, and dealers quietly steered buyers away from anything wearing the Force badge. By 1999, Mercury stopped production, leaving dealers to clear out inventory with little hope of support or resale value. The story played out even more starkly with McCulloch outboards. Marketed as affordable alternatives in the 1960s and 70s, McCulloch engines seemed like a deal until the first breakdown. Owners faced carburetors that flooded, recoil starters that snapped, and gear shifters that never quite lined up. The real problem wasn't just the fragile mechanics, it was the collapse of support. By the late 1990s, McCulloch's parts pipeline dried up. Dealer bulletins warned mechanics not to promise repairs, and by 1999, even basic replacement components had vanished from the supply chain. Engines that might have limped along with the right part ended up abandoned in sheds or stripped for whatever could be salvaged. Mechanics remember the era as a lesson. A cheap engine is only as good as its support network. Without parts or manuals, even a running McCulloch became a stranded asset overnight. Dealers learned to spot the warning signs. Engines built to a price, with thin castings and generic electronics, seldom survived real-world use. The cost of saving a few dollars up front was measured in lost weekends, ruined fishing trips, and mountain piles of unsellable inventory. Mechanics, faced with a service bay full of orphaned engines and angry customers, developed a simple rule: if the parts catalog is thinner than the owner's manual, walk away. These engines didn't just fail on the water, they failed in the marketplace, leaving behind a cautionary tale about the true cost of cutting corners. Some engines arrived with everything going for them: solid engineering, strong performance, and a loyal following. Yet even the best designs can't survive in a vacuum. The Honda BF225, launched in the early 2000s, quickly built a reputation for smooth power and quiet reliability. But by its third or fourth season, stories began to circulate about sudden oil pressure warnings and unexplained engine shutdowns. The culprit traced back to a single sensor, an oil pressure switch prone to failure, sometimes sending false alarms, other times missing real danger. Honda issued technical bulletins and quietly updated the part, but for owners outside the dealer loop, the warning came too late. A failed sensor could mean a $3,000 repair, or worse, a ruined power head. One frustrated owner wrote, "I paid for Honda reliability. Instead, I got a ticking time bomb." The fallout spread beyond the shop floor. Used BF225s, once prized, started showing up in classified ads at half their original value. Mechanics hesitated to take them on, wary of the reputation for sensor gremlins and expensive repairs. The engine itself was never fundamentally flawed. It was the absence of robust support that turned a promising outboard into a liability. For many, the cost to fix a sensor failure outweighed the engine's resale price, pushing owners to cut their losses and move on. A similar fate met older Tohatsu models. Known for simplicity and durability, these engines powered workboats and fishing skiffs for decades. But as emissions rules tightened and production shifted, Tohatsu began phasing out parts support for two-stroke and early four-stroke models. By the late 2010s, critical components, ignition modules, carburetors, even crankshafts, were listed as no longer supplied. Owners scoured forums and salvage yards, sometimes waiting months for a used part to surface. Mechanics, faced with engines they couldn't fix, started refusing Tohatsu jobs altogether. One longtime owner summed it up: "The engine runs fine until something breaks, then you're on your own." These stories echo across marinas and boatyards. Engines that once inspired confidence now sit idle, abandoned not for lack of design, but for lack of support. In the end, even the most promising outboard can become unwanted if the parts pipeline dries up and the manufacturer moves on. Dealers, burned by the experience, grow wary of stocking anything without a clear path to service and spares. For owners, the lesson is bitterly simple. Reliability isn't just about engineering. It's about who stands behind the engine when things go wrong. Dealerships across the country have watched their showrooms transform from centers of excitement to warehouses of regret. The financial machinery that once fueled growth now acts as a trap. Floor plan financing, the backbone of most marine dealerships, was supposed to keep inventory moving. Instead, it has left dealers chained to engines that customers actively avoid. Every unsold outboard accrues monthly interest. Rates that hovered around 4% in 2021 have now doubled or even tripled. For a mid-sized operation holding $1.2 million in inventory, that means thousands lost each month just to keep unwanted engines on the books. In Duluth, a dealership manager runs his finger down a spreadsheet of overdue curtailments. Engines that arrived with fanfare now sit idle for over a year, each month triggering new demands from lenders. After 90 days, banks require a paydown on every unsold unit, 10 to 20% of principal, no exceptions. Miss a deadline and the lender can seize assets or force a fire sale. The manufacturer's buyback promises, once a safety net, are riddled with loopholes. Dealers report repurchase requests denied for the smallest technicalities: a missing manual, a scratch on the cowl, or an engine just outside the policy window. Partial buybacks, delayed payments, and outright refusals have become routine. The pressure isn't just financial. Each engine that lingers on the lot is a tangible reminder of broken promises. Dealers, once eager to move the latest models, now find themselves begging customers to consider engines they wouldn't buy themselves. Incentive programs that once rewarded aggressive ordering have dried up, replaced by frantic markdowns and desperate package deals. A 300-horsepower flagship, discounted by 15%, still won't budge if its reputation is soured online. Meanwhile, warranty claims stack up, and service bays fill with engines that can't be fixed quickly or at all. The economic strain is relentless. Every day an engine sits unsold, the dealer's margin erodes, and the risk of insolvency grows. In this environment, the line between survival and collapse is measured in unsellable stock and mounting debt. Dealers are no longer salespeople. They're crisis managers trying to escape a cycle they never agreed to join. The collapse of confidence in these outboards didn't stay confined to shop floors or dealer spreadsheets. Online forums, once havens for troubleshooting and advice, turned into echo chambers of frustration. Posts about failed injectors and seized gear cases multiplied, some threads stretching hundreds of comments deep. One owner wrote, "They told me this motor was maintenance-free for 3 years. I didn't even make it through one summer." Mechanics chimed in with photos of scorched pistons, warning buyers to steer clear. Each new horror story found an audience far beyond the local marina. YouTube became the industry's unofficial recall board. Tear-down videos showing melted sensors and corroded shift actuators racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Titles like "Why This Outboard Will Ruin Your Summer" and "$20,000 Mistake" dominated search results. Dealers watched as a single viral review could tank demand overnight. Once a model's reputation soured online, no amount of markdowns could move it from the lot. The effect on resale value was immediate and brutal. Engines that sold new for $15,000 struggled to fetch $4,000 after a single season of negative coverage. For some models, classified ads listed them at 30% of their original price, if they sold at all. Depreciation wasn't gradual, it was a cliff. Mechanics began refusing trade-ins, telling customers, "We can only take this for parts." Salvage yards filled with outboards stripped for whatever could be reused. On auction sites, entire pallets of engines appeared labeled "for repair" or "parts only," sometimes at just 10% of their original value. A chorus of owner voices cut through the digital noise. "I bought it for $20,000. I sold it for scrap. I trusted the brand. Now, nobody will touch it." Dealers echoed the sentiment, forced to beg customers to take on engines they couldn't stand behind. The digital cascade didn't just damage reputations, it erased them, leaving a generation of unwanted outboards behind. The fallout continues, measured in lost weekends, empty marinas, and a salvage market that's never been busier. By 2025, U.S. marine dealerships reported over $1.2 million in unsellable outboard inventory. Engines left stranded by a mix of failed engineering, rushed regulations, and the long shadow of digital reputation. This investigation traced how promises of maintenance-free power in the early 2000s collided with compressed R&D timelines and cost-cutting, producing models like the Fichte with catastrophic bolt failures, Force badge engineered with cheap components, and Honda's BF225 plagued by oil pressure sensor faults. Even today, gaps remain. Some recall data is still withheld by manufacturers, and precise numbers on warranty claims from the peak years have never been publicly released. Yet the fallout is clear. Depreciation rates of 50 to 70%, salvage markets flooded, and a generation of boaters and dealers left wary. The story of these 18 outboards is not just about flawed machines, but a warning. When ambition outpaces reliability, the cost is paid by everyone who trusted the promise.